distinguished guests, I guess here in this context, this is kind of most crowded session that we will be talking about nature and ecology. In this sector, we are working together with lots of bodies. Now we are together. Sometimes we do not have chance to meet face-to-face with the investors and for the ones who are following up their licensing process. Now we are all together here. I am the chair as Dr. Murat Yıldız. I am a forest engineer, and in social sciences, we are talking about the practical environmental ethics, and I have a thesis on the ethics of PhD thesis for the environmental ethics. And besides that, for the protection of such areas and the institutional conflicts, the dilemmas, and the natural sources and the ecosystem, there is a common language that we need, that we require. And I experienced this requirement in many of the institutions. For the management of this communication, we need a common language. When we talk like this, it could be sound like too philosophical, maybe too utopic for some of us, but we have the chance of our colleagues, us, make it public, so it is in records, make it much more concrete. The perception of our studies is very important. And after the introduction, I will give floor to our distinguished professors, so they will be sharing important, concrete, and interesting studies in their interest areas. The main purpose in this session is not discussing the benefits or harms of WPPs to nature, but the procedures, the licensing period, and for the installation process, what are the dilemmas and how can we solve those problems? And for the investment and motivation losses resulting from those problems, we will be talking about them, and our energy politic deficits will be discussed in detail, and the chaos resulting from those topics will be highlighted in our perspective. So together with your contributions, we can evaluate them in a much more positive manner. So we are expecting an interactive and mutually contributed result. In fact, the thing is generally coming from the birds. So first we will have Associate Professor Mehmet Ali Tabur. He will be talking about birds, and he will present his studies for WPPs. And Assistant Professor Tarkan Yorulmaz from Çankırı Karatekin University we interviewed many of you about this issue, and today maybe it will be interesting for you, but he will be talking about bats. And also Yasin İlemin will be talking about mammals, in big mammals in the wind power plant procedures. So he will be sharing his experiences and studies. And for the permission periods, in order to identify the procedure, what could be the contribution of that component. So maybe for a possible post-Congress study, we can gather all the information, all your opinions together, so we can discuss in detail later. For a big picture, you see a picture here, and this is from a picture contest of TWEC. Cansu Bildir designed it, and every contestant had a motto for their pictures, and they try to explain the feeling in the picture. It is very pleasing, you can see, and it is not very difficult to understand. You don't need to take time to understand the picture. You can see the explanation here. Women symbolizes wind, and her hairs being the sea means the wide variety of the use of areas, and the cleanliness of the sea means the energy resource is clean. And this is a romantic explanation of a high school student which draws this picture, who draws this picture. And we will have an ecologic evaluation for WPPs. The bats, the wings of the night, we will be talking about this issue, and we will be talking about the ethical parts of the communication and perception of natural protection, and then we will be having the wind energy investments, social and ecological participation modeling. First, we introduce the starting point. In ancient times, we saw the gathering of wind and ecology. Is it a current phenomena or a lifelong phenomena? In fact, if you are a noble, you are respecting sun a lot, but for example, in our modern life, while living, appreciating sun, maybe subconsciously we have a design to limit its power. And timing, material, style, we have the results. And then suddenly you see a picture in the nature. This is just a dead tree here, but it says, "Don't let me go." And the person here is the one who will just cut it down. And they are destroying nature. So there is who, when, how, where. There are such questions, and we are wondering the nature since our childhood, and we started to observe it. In Egypt, there are Egyptian gods and goddesses. They have all functions. There is a social structure here that you can understand from those. And in our classes, we are discussing all those things. In fact, Batur is also here. When you see, there is a goddess of cats. There is a god of chaos, god of war, and a goddess of the river Nile. And there are frogs, the goddess of love and revenge. And again, another chaos, but among those, there is a goddess of calculation and measure. So in a belief system, there is such a multidisciplinary approach. we can see how it is, how the pyramids are built. And then they observe the animals, the jackals, for example, how they live in the middle of the desert. And they observe that they bury the dead ones in the corners of the desert. And there is an old story. Anatolia is the lands of Kibele, and Kibele and Atis. Kibele fell in love with Atis. And in Sivrihisar, there is a king, and in his son's wedding, they invite Kibele here. And they turned Kibele into a tree. So subconsciously, there are some social messages like it is not a destruction, but a permanent life for serving people as a tree. So while giving children education, we are trying to simulate future, observing as it is in our permit procedures and sectoral reports, the efficiency. We all observe those, and we know that the rules have some ethical codes. Together with environment, we need to respect the nature, the living creatures. And in rural areas, we have some problems. We need to deal with all those. And in urban areas, we have some animals and plants that we are all living together. And we discover water, underwater, or the artificial water. These waters existence in different environments. For example, we are still discussing the swamps, for example, the existence of waters in swamps, and in the consumption, what is our energy perception. All those just come together, and we need to identify a common language with all those components. And even we are discussing what is happening underground, and we are including the parents into this training of children. This is what we do right now. At that point, with this energy, I would like to invite Assistant Professor Mehmet Ali Tabur in order to share his experiences with us. Thank you very much.
First of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me to this great event, and I'm really honored to be addressing you. I'm from Süleyman Demirel University. I am Mehmet Ali Tabur, as specified by our colleague. I'm working in the field of birds, and he actually showed some paintings and some figures. Birds are involved in any phase of our lifetime. We can actually express our feelings with birds. If our lover is away from us, we have sent birds to give some messages, and birds are also involved in our songs and also in mythology. And in terms of good luck and bad luck, we are using expressions with the words of birds, and we actually liken our lovers to birds. And in terms of obsession, one of the most important therapies is regarding birds. And we are working in integrity with birds, but we came to this world after birds. 65 million years ago, birds are claimed to have evolved, and their history dates back 150 million years. We have only been in this world for 8,000 or 10,000 years. We have become one with birds, and they have actually brought us into their lives. But our friendship is like unilateral in recent years. So we are in constant interaction with birds, and birds are also interacting with WPPs. In my introduction, I would like to state that, of course, we need energy demand, and cells cannot function without energy or ATP. And because of energy, I can utter some words. Without energy, you can do nothing. If there is zero energy, then we will go extinct. If there is energy, there is life. Therefore, in the presence of living organisms, human beings need more and more energy. Our level of welfare has developed. Our life has become more rapid. In order to adapt to this rapid living style, we needed energy. I believe in Nasreddin Hoja. He states that this is the center of the world. This is true. Civilizations, grounds, and surface ores and beauties are present in our country. This is the center of the world. And in Ice Age, human beings and living organisms have used Anatolia as the area for rescue, and Jewish people have actually sought salvation in Turkey during the Holocaust. So birds are also coming to Anatolia for wintering and for their summer time. In our country, we are living in a country with high wind potential, but we cannot make use of this potential. In the previous sessions, I have seen that there are some promising projects for future, and there will be more effective and renewable energy projects. It will improve our GDP, and it will also improve our comfort. I scanned some literature. It may not be updated until the end of 2023. Actually, our aim is to have an installed power of 20,000 megawatts out of wind power. You see the distribution of installed power in our country in terms of wind power. As you can see, Aegean region is the first one, and day by day the number of WPPs is increasing. I only had access to data from 2015, and it is also attracting attention of the public. Some people are quite subjective concerning their criticism, and we are encountering such criticism in our activities. But in order to eliminate subjectivity in the public, we can only focus on positive impacts. You need to provide some economic impacts to the people living in that area where WPPs are installed. There are two parties. One of them is employers and the other one is scientists. In order to inform people, we can help you. But I'm sad to say that the mission of scientists is to publish articles and to present them to target group. But in our country, public institutions are not making use of these data, so our efforts are futile. So public institutions are responsible for making this data accessible to the public. So we don't have good relations with public institutions, and public institutions think that we are complicating the process and there's a conflict of authorities and we don't know which institution to apply for sorting out our problems. After 2020, the number of WPPs will increase. Why do wars break out? Because of energy deficit. This is the basis of all global wars. Therefore, in order to ensure peace in your country, you are trying to publicize your interests at global level, and there is an installed power need of 180,000 megawatts, and Europe can only produce its electricity at a level of 12.1%, and 85 million houses are needed in the world, so there will be some energy demand out of this housing. We have caused some delays in this process, but when you look at this country, our country is among developing countries. Our position is not that bad. But there's always room for improvement, and this sector is attracting attention and interest day by day. Actually, I would like to explain something here. In one of the congresses, one of the directors general responsible for WPPs has requested us to deal with environmental impact assessments concerning WPPs. We stated that we do not want to be involved in this process because of criticism. Please guide us with your articles, he said. And after that day, this is a mission for me, and this is considered as a public service. Our state has trained me and given me a title, so I have to achieve this mission in return for this public service. As you all know, I'm not dealing with the entire presentation. WPPs have positive and negative impacts. They have lots of positive impacts as shown in the slide, but there are some limited negative impacts out of WPPs. There can be some problems regarding noise pollution or visibility, visual pollution, and they can negatively affect communication systems, and they can actually pose visual pollution in natural environment. And if there is a problem with wind, then there may be interruption concerning power generation through WPPs. When I made observations in bird migratory routes, one of the farmers in Hatay stated that WPPs are negatively affecting olive production. I asked the reason why, but he didn't provide me with any scientific basis or ground. It doesn't emit any radiation and it doesn't emit any chemical. So I wanted to work in this area, and I have to inform society about this issue. When we look at the interaction of WPPs and birds, when we look at the studies, our country is along the migratory routes of birds, and they are movable organisms, animals, and any barrier along their migratory route may interrupt this migration process. And actually, birds store some fuel or energy for this migration. We don't know the reason why they migrate. And a planetarium is created for the migration routes of birds, and without any tutor or trainer, birds are directed to migration, and this is hereditary. And there may be some reasons regarding hormonal balances for migration. And there are 4 important migratory routes in the world, and our country has important ones. One of them is from Istanbul Strait, and birds are trying to use shortcuts for their migration. And the other one is from Artvin Borchka. I'll show them on the map. And through these 2 migratory routes, they are staying in our country for summer or winter. Some of them are using our country as transit routes, and some of them are actually going to Africa. And I talked about interaction, and when I looked at the studies concerning WPP's interaction, could you please sum up, because we have limited time and we will receive some comments and questions from the floor at the end. And in the UK, a study was performed on 1,234 turbines. They have seen that WPPs are not life-threatening for birds. Serious bird deaths and serious injuries occur due to crashes with wind towers, energy lines and poles. You may ask this question to me: is there any such study in Turkey? Mr. Arıkan and Turan published an article in 2017. They actually made a study on wind turbines between 2010 and 2014, and within this process 14 birds, actually 27 birds were found to be killed by WPPs. When do WPPs pose a risk? Especially large birds with limited maneuver capability are prone to these problems concerning WPPs. It is easier to eliminate these problems, and maybe the WPP can interrupt its operation through some movement sensors. when they see a bird. Studies in our country do not have any concrete finding regarding the damages of WPPs on birds, and I haven't encountered any killed birds in WPPs. And we also need to consider some other reasons for the killing of these birds. When you consider individuals killed in road accidents, I mean not individual birds killed in road accidents, and when you also consider other anthropological pressures, WPPs are leading to limited negative impacts. You see the migratory routes passing through Turkey. Our country is used as a network for bird migration, and there are vertical and horizontal migratory routes in our country. When I apply to TWEC for the observation of bird migration routes, they state that please do not apply to us with these projects. But we are trying to apply these projects or implement these projects for scientific purposes, and we need to protect birds for younger generations. Birds are indicators, important indicators for us. Birds are important ecological indicators of a certain area. And you see the bird migration routes again. Turkey is along these routes. We have nearly 500 bird species in Turkey, and in Europe continent we have 550 bird species, and there are 10,000 bird species at global level. I'm giving some examples from international articles. The risk of crash is at a very low level, and bird migration could be solitary or in the form of a herd. And daytime, nighttime migration are also possible. So while making these evaluations, a single expert cannot decide on these issues. All of the turbine areas need to be observed in order to see whether there's any interaction or not. I'm coming to the end of my presentation. There are some studies which were performed for 4 years, and they looked at the routes of 979 goose herds, and they have seen that these birds have changed their routes by looking at the locations of WPPs. And these lightning posts that we are using for urban lightning are posing more problems for these birds. And actually there are nearly 500 bird species in Turkey. You see the families of birds observed in Turkey. You see 323 internationally accepted bird species in Turkey. They are taken from IUCN categories, and 323 of them do not have any conservation status, and there are a total of 36 species that need to be conserved. When you look at the local status, A12 category is covering 62 status, and they need to be conserved at local level. and I'm showing my references. Sorry for using up my time. Thank you for your attention and patience.
Sayın hocamıza teşekkür.
Thank you very much, distinguished professor. In fact, from now on, let's continue in a way that in a much more advantageous way, because Mehmet Ali already gave us the general picture. So in order to have your questions, maybe in 10 minutes, Tarkan and Yasin also will encourage the questions from the hall, so you can summarize and we can have the questions later on. So, Tarkan, let's have your presentation on bats. Hello, Tarkan Yorulmaz from Çankırı Karatekin University, from Biology Department, and I am working on bats' ecological effects. In the field, we have some experiences, and I would like to share them. For 6 years, for example, in vine fields, we are examining the impact on the bats, and we are giving consultancy. But the problem that we are coming across is bats are rare. You cannot see them all the time. But what is the importance of bats and why they are in the agenda of WPP projects right now? So, in order to understand this issue, the use of bats should be answered at first, and the potential of Turkey in terms of bats and why they are having such crushing cases with the WPPs. We will be having the answers, and I will be trying to giving you the answers during the presentation. All over the world, for 25 years, this is a known case. In fact, in the first times that we had the WPPs, it is desired to have the bird impact for VPPs, but bats were not included in the first place. But after that, the bats were put in the agenda for impact evaluation. And in Europe, there were working groups that have registries for the deaths and for crash cases of bats to WPPs. And let's know these mysterious creatures of nature. Among mammals, bats are in the second place for their species. All over the world, there are 100 and 240 species, and in Turkey, we have 39 species. They are different animals, in fact. Very interesting. The only flying mammal, and this different feature is the disadvantage of bats for WPPs. They have the case of crushings to WPPs. They have a long life term, and in the same sizes, like a mouse can live for 5 years, but that size of a bat can live up to 30 years. They have a long life. And for the reproduction, they have this ability also. Before winter time, the female bats carry the sperms for 6 months, and in spring they awake with as pregnant. And for the hibernation physiological features, this hibernation, it is not examined very carefully. They assume it for the whole year, but they only active for 6 months, from April to September. And this active duration just means the activity during nighttime, not daytime. So during daytime, there is no coincidence of WPP crashes of bats, and they have an richness in terms of ecological environments. It is known that they are living in inns, in deserted places, in trees. You can see them all over those places. In a cave, like 3 or 5 centimeter place, they can live in there. This is not, this is an adult animal, in fact, and this is the largest, biggest bat you can see in the world, in the size of an adult human being. And why they are crashing to WPPs? We have 39 species, and they do not have the same pattern for flying. According to their wing features, they fly horizontally, they choose open areas, and some have maneuvers and spend more time in certain areas. And those are the most risky group for WPPs, as they have maneuvers and they spend more time in certain areas. If those bats are living in the WPP areas, there could be crashing cases. And maybe whenever you hear bats, you can remember caves, and you can just check, you can ask the critical question: are there any caves in the area of WPP? However, bats are commonly living in other places other than caves, and their feeding habits very variable. In Turkey, they are just feeding from insects, and just one species feed from the fruits. So, are they migrating? Why this bat is going across from this region for the place that they will hibernate or that they will reproduce? There could be possibility of coming across with WPP. In Turkey, we do not have long miles migrating bats, but there are some species doing this. And what is the importance of bats in terms of ecology? This is a bat home. This is placed here on purpose in agricultural areas. In order to have it much more ecological, they place bat caves, bat houses, so the insects are eaten by those bats, so those insects cannot give any harm to agricultural products, and bats get feed from them. And there are some pheromone traps for the insects in the forest. But when we check here, you can see there is a dead bat, because this bat try to catch the insect, and they just trapped in this trap for the insects. This is a wind power plant field, so we see a different case here. In those fields, we can see many different factors on the bats. The goals of bats, this is tradable, and the trade rates in Turkey is getting increased day by day. You can see the kilograms and the amounts, the cost, and the ones feeding from the fruits. They have the seeds in their body, and then they defecate them in another place. So it is very important to have this variability for the ecology. And during the instruction, installation, and production, we are taking care of bats. How we work on them. Before instruction, we are are searching the potential and risks of the field. During the phase of instruction and in production phase, we are checking the impacts on the activity of bats. And what are we doing? How we are doing all those? As bats are active in night, it is not possible for us to see them in the field directly, but we have ultrasonic devices that record their voices, and we place them in the field of WPP. We get whole night records. It could be project-based or for long term. We see the intensity of bat activity, the diversity of bats. We are checking all them, and in turbine fields we have samplings by using these devices. And close to WPP fields, it is a risk. If there is a cave, it is a risky situation because bats are using those caves, and those bats living in these caves, if they are using the valley or if they are heading towards to WPPs. We are checking this. And also for the carcass screening, are there any death cases, or are there any incidents that bats are crashing to WPPs? We are searching those. And as the findings, how many bat types are living in the field and the national and international protection status of those bat types, we are trying to figure out those things. And with this protection status, when we check them nationally and internationally, you can see the device results here. The ultrasonic voices from bats, we use them to differentiate their types. So they all have different voices. We can understand the number of types here. You can see the activity levels, and here is the in July 26th, you can see the activity is very high and showed in green. And in turbine field, we can understand which type of bats are living here and what is the relation of bats and the plants here. So, if we have a good analysis and good timing, you can do all those things. And for the risk factors, again, for the WPP areas and unnoticed area, when we have the turbines, they generally choose the higher levels to install them. It is a good thing for the bats because the high level of wind just decrease the activity of bats. Between 3 to 4 meters per second, it is good for bats, but if it is higher than 6, it is a risky situation for bats. So, and also the lightning, as there is lightning, there will be heating. If there is heating, there will be insects, and insects attracts the attention of bats, so there will be bats. We are recommending to decrease the use of lights. Maybe you can use photocells, for example. I think it is feasible to use them. I don't know accurately, but in fields it could be understand, like in the shaft fields. No, it is not for that. Just for the turbine fields, it decrease using photocells. It decreased 50% of bats activity when we compare with the previous year's values. Just turning off the lights, you can decrease 50% of activity by bats. And some features are, of course, much more risky. Maybe we can explain in detail if you have questions. And this is the conclusion part for us. The analysis and pictures of the field are revealed, and turbine-based, high-risky turbines, for example, or risky projects, we are saying we are not working directly with zero point 0.1. Just shut down the project because there is a risk, or you can go on because there is no risk. It is not like that. We have recommendations that are applicable in Turkey and internationally. We are using them. Turning off the lights, alternative habitat creation for bats, so you can lead them to another habitat. Not having trees under the turbine area. So, in very critical areas, the recommendations importance gains crucial importance. And this for the EDRs, for monitoring, much scientific, efficient, applicable, and right recommendations. If you want all those, experts should be preparing the reports. Unfortunately, in our country, we cannot do this. An entomologist, for example, they prepare a bat report, so they give you 0.1. They say it is not harmless, or just shut down the project. They say this. They sometimes do not visit the field, and such reports, in one of such reports, for example, an endemic type of bat is reported to live in Turkey, which is living in Afghanistan normally. It is not possible to see it in Turkey, but they didn't visit the field, so they just wrote the report. So the ones who are following us, following our schedule to visit the field and etc., checking our existing here, our preparation process. I am in this business for like 6 or 7 years maybe. I prepared over 30 reports on bats, and we have experience, so we can answer your questions, what we want. We talked about this. Energy is an indispensable thing for us, and it is a must for us. However, nature is a resource for our world, and we need to live in that. So we need to identify the problems in the field, and we need to give a sustainable recommendation. In order to have that, we need to have an active and applicable monitoring system. So for a longer time, in a healthier way, we can live as humans, but we need to use sources effectively, and we need to create a balance between natural resources use and ecological lives. So we need to apply this into our lives, so we need to have a sustainable world. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Teşekkürler.
Thank you, Mr. Tarkan, for this nice presentation. Actually, Mr. Tarkan has entered into this subject on how to set up a system for the conservation of bats. Will we be opponents, or will we cooperate with energy investors by also conserving the nature? Maybe they can give some in-depth recommendations to you. And licensing procedures and the time lost can be minimized with the recommendations of our colleagues. Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Yasin. He will be talking about other mysterious animals of this world. Then we will have a general evaluation part. This should be the initiation of an initiative. This should be a part of a sectoral activity. We should be the stakeholders in this part. When we look at the interest of the sector, maybe we can decide where to start. And it depends on the profile of the people who are present in the hall now. So we have to identify our current status. Now I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Yasin. Distinguished participants, I'm coming from Muğla Sıtkı Koçman University. My specialty is continental mammals and especially predators such as wolf and brown bears, and I generally perform my studies in Western Anatolia, and I'm working in some specific animals in my thesis, and they talked about the relation of WPPs and flying animal species, and I would like to talk about mammals. 250 or 300 years later, our civilization can generate energy, but if we do not do it in a sustainable manner, we will not be able to talk about the nature in which we can live. How will we consume this energy? This is a paradox. Therefore, with the contributions of our previous colleagues, we can contribute to potential investors in this area. Mr. Mehmet Ali talked about the interaction of birds and WPPs, and Mr. Tarkan talked about the interaction of bats with WPPs, and I'll be talking about the interaction of continental mammals with WPPs. These mammals are walking and changing their locations, but as they cannot fly, they are not under a certain risk. We are talking about an indirect risk here, especially predators are shown on this photo. They need some food and they need a prey for having these activities, and predators are represented by a limited number of species, but their and this is valid for all energy development activities. When a human activity is initiated, a noise emission is materialized, and these sensitive species are getting distant from that area. In North American studies, there is a higher number of herbivores in WPP areas, so they are not negatively affected by WPPs, and it means that there is no negative process for ecology, but carnivores are actually getting away from that region. If predators are away from that area, then herbivores are having a better place, but the pressure on fauna increases. If species such as wild boar increase in this area, then the pressure on fauna increases, and it disrupts herbal or material vegetation, and it poses a physical pressure on soil. Especially predators rather than herbivores are affected at a higher level. I would like to summarize something to you about this issue. What can we do in order to keep predators here? Feasibility is really important. You need to perform monitoring for 6 months before any construction activity in order to see whether this area is used by carnivores. So an alternative area may be recommended or proposed. After WPPs are constructed and are commissioned, they may see such carnivores in this area. But when they get away from this area, you cannot see them in this area. All energy developments and house developments are also subjected to such monitoring. Some predators have some exceptions, such as jackal and red wolf, especially. They are making use of this opportunity and they are coming to this area to feed themselves. And some people who are not experts in this area are stating that there is no danger, there is no potential danger for predators in this area. I don't want to prolong it anymore. What can we do for solutions? As I have specified before, a feasibility study needs to be performed at least 6 months ago. If there is no such species, the construction activities can be initiated, and at least 5 years of monitoring needs to be conducted in this area after construction. During lifetime, you may not see a wings in this area, and in order to identify these predators, we are using photo traps. If they are present there, some technologies are used to capture the life cycle of these animals, and this will be the basis for potential energy investments within the upcoming years. Especially in Europe and North America, this issue is not the case. Why? Because in those regions there are human uses in Europe starting from archaic periods, and their nature is highly degraded. But in our country, some areas are new zoning areas and newly constructed areas. So maybe these areas are used by predators for reproduction or hiding. If possible, we need to consider whether these areas are under the effect of human beings. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for your patience. Thank you very much, Mr. Yasin. We have 20 more minutes until the end of our session. Is there anyone who wants to state their comments or contributions, or who wants to ask a question about this subject? So Mr. Mustafa Ateseven will ask a question. Indeed, I would like to draw your attention to this subject, and it was also included in presentations. There is such perception. Wind turbines are considered to be leading to problems, and it was also specified in the presentation of Mr. Mehmet Ali Tabur. And there was another issue, wind syndrome. The issue called wind syndrome doesn't have any scientific basis, just like stress. These distinguished scientists need to include an issue in their presentations or articles if it has a scientific basis. This wind syndrome is a common occurrence in our WPPs, and it resulted from a personal article, and in wind power developments this is also made the subject of a lawsuit, but this doesn't have any legal basis. This is just a claim. And as Turkish Wind Energy Association, we need to identify these issues correctly. This is the main perception in Turkey. Impacts of wind turbines and their impacts on nature and animals need to be identified in a more appropriate manner. And we can only do that in cooperation with universities and distinguished scientists. Maybe we can organize joint projects, and we can turn these activities into a scientific report. And in the upcoming period, we would like to be a part of these activities. If you would like to give any contribution, this is what I would like to say. Maybe we can receive the opinions of our presenters here. We would like to thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting us here. So we were given 1.5 hours. I have performances of making presentations for 14 hours, and our president has emphasized on an important subject, and NGOs are away from expressing themselves, but this is a need for associations such as Turkish Wind Energy Association. Next year we'll be talking about climate change and the movement of trees concerning forest fires. As institutions, we are always talking about the negative impacts of fire, but what happens after fire? We are forgetting about the negative impacts of fires, especially after fires. Soil, succession, biological diversity are triggered after fires. There was a fire in Sürmene. It was a cover fire. It's a method for afforestation. You burn all the elements that actually interrupt the development of soil cover, and you burn this cover in order to create and improve the growing of coniferous trees. And public institutions are away from the public and policies, And while dealing with these problems, they are getting away from their essential objectives. Our need is not to plant trees all the time, and we have a steps ecosystem, and it was made unpopular by our public. Normally, a country with the presence of 30% of forests is considered rich, and our country has 27% of forests in our land. And in Europe, there are only forests that are conserving their biological diversity, and they are making criticisms about the transformation of countries into monoculture. And it also affects climate change. And in the north, we have forests in our country. And there's a shifting of 20 kilometers for forests, and they are going up and up in the north. And they are moving and migrating. Therefore, we need to consider many data and elements together. And for 2 days, we have been talking to friends from the sector, and we have been in talks with our scientists. And at this point, if we get to know our grounds or justifications, we can sort out solutions that eliminate all costs. That's why we have come here to talk to you about how to implement this methodology, and we will do our best to establish and maintain this communication and direct it to the most appropriate areas, and we have to improve the reliability of the sector. This is our wish. Otherwise, our activities would mean nothing. Irrespective of the role, we need to develop a system and we need to turn this sentence into a concrete structure. Is there any comment from our scientists?
Ekolojik değerlendirme.
For the ecologic evaluation reports, while writing those, we have some agencies that we interview. However, we do not see the administrators of those institutions. We go to fields, do the evaluations. In the beginning, for example, I think our professors will agree with me. We take pictures and we do the evaluations. We do not take some sides. And when they ask for help, the institutions, I mean, the state asks for this help, the companies, we demanded from them to have some public awareness meetings, and we want them to include us to those meetings so we can scientifically inform people. But they say, you have a great goodwill. But when we go to that region, province, or the village, we are making great financial investments. They earn their money from these investments, and locally or in a larger area, we also help them logistically, for example, help their children, etc. However, we are now tired of their individual problems. They are just triggered by some incomplete information. For example, in Bergamo, for example, with cyanide gold research, people have a very subjective approach and they evaluate the situation in a very fast manner. But when we try to explain the situation, there is a resistance from the public. And I'm asking to myself, am I not a good scientist? Am I not highlighting my people on those issues, collecting data, etc.? I promise to myself and to you for energy sector, for wind plants and for coal plants, for the information collection, I am here and I am ready to take part in enlightening those points. First of all, it is very important for us to be here. Generally, we go to fields, do our job, and people generally do not know what we are doing. And there are 3 steps. The first one. First, and in 5 WPP projects, I took part in the research evaluation for bats. And when the owner is signing the papers, he asked about what is the case with the bats, why I need to sign all those papers. And then they decided to call me because they couldn't answer. And we presented the case. We had the chance to present the facts. And here, being together with you, it is very valuable for us. And this is the first thing. As professionally, the ones who are not aware of the wildlife, the bats that we love, we have to talk about them. And the second thing, there are conflicts with the WPPs and what are we doing, why we are taking some precautions, why we are taking too much care for bats. We need to explain this, and for your recommendation, for your offer. I believe you have a journal, and if you allow us and if you think it is fine, as an extra addition, we can explain what are we doing in the fields, the bats and WPP relation and other scientific studies performed by our distinguished professors. We can publish all those, so in a faster and effective way, we can just distribute this information. And in the weekend, the Chamber of Electricity Engineers of Turkey had a meeting, so we will be talking about these issues also. And I have a memory. In the first bat monitoring demand, Ministry had a recommendation like, in this report, please make it prepared by a person who has PhD for bats. And they think, are there any such mad person who will have a PhD on bats? But yes, in Turkey there are experts, professors, associate professors. This is a field for us. Academically and scientifically, this is a new field for us, because this bats behavioral models tried to be understood by us. This is a scientific output also for us. It is not a thing like we are writing the reports and that's it. If you accept our offer, we will be very pleased to have this journal together with you. I don't want to sabotage the whole, so I'm checking in one hand. Related to the journal, I don't think we should spend all our power in one edition, but maybe if you find it suitable, we can have a column in every edition. And if you are a columnist in our journal, we will be pleased to have you. So your recommendations could be evaluated in this way. We can have an interview with our editor, and after the discussions, we can have this chance to have your information. As much as we inform people about the ecological issues, we will do it better in terms of plants. And the other thing is for the visible pollution. I think in Murat's picture, it was a great picture, I believe. It is a subjective issue, not based on objective criteria, but in such programs, in such activities, having such presentations, because as you know, we publish those presentations afterwards. So in lawsuits, this could be an argument point against us. So I would like to have the sensitivity of our scientists also, because I am very fond of the wind issue, and in Ministry of Forests we had some similar meetings. In other platforms also we had meetings, but this is subjective as I stated, but this is a fact. When we check Germany, it is like the half of Turkey as a country, and they have over 55,000 installed capacity. That means our capacity is nearly 6,500 megawatts as in terms of wind. It is Germany has 25% less installed power. For example, Denmark, very sensitive for nature, and more than 50% of their electricity generation coming from wind. And together with nature, they manage those investments. So we should be also managing it very in a very good way. So maybe our participants have some more questions. So thank you very much for your contributions. Thank you. Do we have any questions from the hall or any contributions? Then maybe I would like to thank to our professors. Yasin, I will give you a final speech chance, but in order Tarkan to attain the meeting that he mentioned, maybe he need to catch the flight, so we can let you. Thank you very much, and I am really sorry for leaving early, but I hope we will have another chance to meet with you. This is a very valuable moment for us because we are sharing our concerns all together, and thank you very much. Yes, Yasin. I would like to share a memory with you. In 2013, I went to Sweden for a wildlife research, and my journey was through Denmark and Norway. As you have stated, Germany and Denmark, they are in a very advanced position for wind power plants. In Denmark and Sweden, I noticed the wind power plants, and when we reached the research center in Sweden, after 15 days, they asked me the question. They were also working on the big mammals, and they asked me, how many wolves do you have in Turkey in steppes? I stated there are no people working on specifically wolves, and we have last articles in ION-CN. It is estimated to have 1,500 or 2,000 wolves, and they laughed, all the participants in the hall. And I asked, why did you laugh? And they stated, what is this numbers? And I asked them, how many do you have in Sweden? And they say 471. In the next reproduction phase, there will be that much baby wolves. They have a very small number of population, like nearly 1 out of 8. But they have nearly this similar financial numbers of our country, and they protect their environmental resources, natural resources, the diversity. They are taking so much care. So after 200 years, if we produce energy but cannot spend it on any area, and there is no meaning for that. And in here, we have the chance to share our concerns. It is a great opportunity for us, and I would like to thank all of you. If you have any questions, I will be glad to answer. So, at last, how many wolves do we have in Turkey? I don't know the exact number, maybe 3,000. Yes, that is a very good point to highlight. In abroad, in every topic, there are serious studies. Statistical information. They stated 471 wolves, and there will be that much newborns. They do the forecasting on how many wolves will be born. They have this systematic follow-up standards. And it is not in just our sector, not just those topics. But maybe as the country, we need to evaluate all data objectively, have a data bank, process them, and after processing, evaluation and interpretation mechanisms should be created. But step by step, we will realize in our sector, our sector's distance with scientists is tried to be decreased with the efforts of our association. And I believe that with our efforts, with those meetings, there will be great outcomes, and we will inform people with right information, and when they reach the concrete information, they can evaluate themselves, so they will not be taking actions at that moment, but they will consume the information first, because we are paying so much attention for the information of people. So at those points, we hope to have an improved collaboration. Thank you very much for your contributions. And In fact, we had a 5-minute movie. Maybe we can watch it soon. After work, going back home, or in the evenings, we are individuals, not an instrument in the sector, but as a member of the family or toys of our children, for example. We have some activities together with them, and we are paying attention for their natural eating orders, etc. We are visiting natural places, and we are experimenting this natural way of living. And this is a basic sense of being human in a developed country, in a European country, for example. We are contributing our country to have this level, and this common language is required because of this. And the common language with nature. I had students, for example, lastly, the architectural students, the engineering students, the computer engineers. We had a mixed group, and we took them to have camps in forest. So through the semester, they had some studies, but we for example, for Yasin, it is very difficult to follow those animals because they are living in wildlife and they do not let you to see them in their natural environment. But we told our people that you will not have phone connection at the campsite, so just let your friends or families that you arrived, and we do not let them to use their phones through the camp. And we stated them, this is an extreme experience that you will have here. And this is the cycle of life. We had a documentary for trees, and in Yenice forest, they stated that if you do not touch the forest, it will be that much beautiful. But we laughed, and they told me, just wait. And we walked a bit, and this third issue in forest, we see that there are a bunch of cut trees, and they are just cutting the trees and then planting new ones. However, having this production forest, you are entering them in 10 or 15 years. There is a cycle, you know, with some technological developments and with the observations, the simulation of forest. We are trying to take precautions, but the discovery of children, children's discovery of nature. We have a video, and I would like to excuse me because I have another meeting in the next hall. There is a video file.
À cette époque, pour moi, là-bas, tout n'était que magie et mystère. J'y pénétrais avec mes jeux d'enfant, et sans savoir pourquoi, cette forêt m'appelait. Comme un oiseau, je pris mon envol, et ivre de bonheur, je me mis à courir. ce n'était plus la mienne. La vie est une longue histoire. Une vie, une mort. Tout ça passe, comme les êtres que nous croisons, ces couleurs que nous aimons, ces espaces que nous côtoyons. Il m'arrive de couler quelques larmes, mais ma joie de redécouvrir chaque jour ceux que j'aime me comble bien au-delà.
Tekrar teşekkür.
And thank you very much for your contributions. This is all for us. This is the time for goodbye. And from now on, we can have your questions in the next meetings, and we are open to have communication with you. Thank you very much, and good evening.